CEO discovers Waitress's hidden leftover bread. What he uncovered was inspiring and transformative. Jack sat at a corner booth in the diner, the relentless noise of clattering dishes and sizzling food surrounding him, yet an unshakable silence enveloped his thoughts. At 45, he had achieved everything: exotic vacations, a house on the lake, a prestigious title, but inside, a hollow ache resisted the satisfaction that wealth was supposed to bring. His life had become a series of ruthless meetings and cold profitability charts. And in the pursuit of success, he had sacrificed the warmth of connections that once nourished his spirit. As he stirred his untouched coffee, he caught movement across the room. A waitress, Claire, was saving leftover bread from tables, carefully wrapping each piece in paper. Her focus intrigued him. In an era where wasting food was the norm, here was someone valuing even the smallest scraps. It reminded him of simpler days, a flicker of humility in a world obsessed with profit. He could see the effort etched in her face as she performed her small acts of frugality, a stark contrast to his image of success. Could she, and what she represented, possibly reinvigorate his dwindling sense of purpose? He signaled for her attention, and Claire approached, balancing a plate of fries that hadn't even needed a moment on Jack's table. "Everything okay?" she asked, genuinely concerned amidst the chaos of her job. As they spoke, he learned about her long hours, the money she sent home to support her aging parents, and her brother studying hard for a future he could barely afford. Her sincerity dug into the layers of his careful facade. Every story she shared peeled back the steel walls he'd built around himself. He felt as if she were revealing pieces of a forgotten self, one that cherished family, community, and belonging. But then, as if a flashing light had interrupted the moment, an email chimed across his phone, a notification that chilled him. The company was planning to shutter this diner in the wake of an expansion project, erasing Claire's livelihood and the warmth of a community hub. Dread rolled through him like a dark tide, threatening to engulf. The juxtaposition of his corporate ambitions against the very real potential loss of Claire's world was unsettling. Here was an outpouring of sacrifice and hard work on one side, and his callous decision on the other. The internal conflict surged within him, the weight of expectation from his board members hung heavily, promising accolades or perhaps, the stench of failure. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Back in that meeting room, dozens of eyes would scrutinize his every word. Should he choose to protect profit and a business model that bloated his status, or stand firm, daring to advocate for values buried beneath growth and advancement? Anxiety twisted his gut. Jack could feel the tightening in his chest grow heavier with each passing second. The realization that the very entities he was a part of were controlled by cold calculations clawed at him. He stood on the precipice of moral devastation, caught between the roaring tides of ambition calling him forward and the voices of conscience urging him back. Today marked a crossroads he never envisioned, and now the weight of the choice loomed, threatening to swallow whole the man he had become. With Claire's sacrifices echoing in his mind, he was left wrestling with questions that refused to settle. Was he ready to gamble everything for meaning, to shatter the prison he had built from accolades and financial prowess? The following morning, Jack awoke to gray skies, the weight of his decision from the previous day heavy on his mind. Without a doubt, Claire's enthusiastic defense of the diner had sparked something painful yet crystalline within him. He dressed slowly, his usual crisp button-up now feeling suffocatingly tight, as if it were the very armor of his corporate identity that he was attempting to shed. The trepidation mixed with a newfound resolve coursed through him. At the office, a layer of tension settled over him like a dark cloud. His colleagues, preoccupied with presentations and profit margins, were unaware of the storm brewing within him. Jack navigated the labyrinth of cubicles, his usual swagger dampened. He stepped into his glass-walled office, a fortress of sorts, yet felt more like a gilded cage. The wall-to-wall chart displays and framed accolades represented a success he could no longer fully embrace. He sat at his desk, fingers hovering over the keys. Instead of an email steeped in corporate jargon, his mind shifted toward drafting a letter to his board of directors outlining a vision of sustainable business practices. It was an idea both exhilarating and terrifying. His heart raced as he began to type, the words flowing with surprising clarity: "We cannot grow our profits at the cost of the very community that surrounds us." But doubt crept in, threatening to choke off his infusion of purpose. He hesitated, thoughts racing: what if they reject my vision? The loss of support from his peers felt like abandonment on the horizon. His stomach twisted, pitting ambition against reluctance. But wasn't this what he had been living for? Words unfurling a path to redemption, a means to combat the numbing tide he had succumbed to for so long. His mind wandered back to Claire, her hope and resilience, storing leftovers not just from tables, but from a life working to make the most of what she had. This authenticity ignited a fierce determination in him. The unprecedented weight of leadership now felt more like a calling to protect stories like Claire's rather than continue fueling a machine that looked past them. Few hours into the day, Jack found himself outlining a plan, envisioning how the diner could become a model for sustainable dining, working directly with local farmers and perhaps even utilizing the profits for community initiatives rather than mindless expansion. The prospect was breathtaking. Then the phone rang, dragging him from his thoughts. It was his assistant, Meredith, announcing the upcoming board meeting. Jack's palms sweat as he thought about presenting his radical idea. "I'll need some time to prepare," he replied, trying to mask the quake in his voice. After the call ended, he stared at the enormity of the decision ahead. Would he present the new direction, risking everything he had built? As he sat there, grappling with the reckoning that lay before him, he realized that his evolution hinged not on the acclamation of his peers, but on genuine impact, a legacy not of wealth, but of compassion. Out of nowhere, his phone pinged again. The subject line caused his breath to hitch: urgent, meeting to discuss diner closure. Jack clenched his fists, determination igniting within him. This wasn't just about saving a place. It was about saving a way of life, redirecting the course of his own existence. As he prepared to make a stand, a question loomed, sharper than any boardroom critique. Could he confront the chilling reality of his decisions and face the board with a vision for a brighter, more humane path? The time had come to decide. An inner confrontation awaited that would either yield transformation or fracture his resolve altogether. Jack stood on the threshold, ready to challenge the very fabric of his own ambitions. As he gathered his thoughts, a chilling tension settled in the pit of his stomach, an uncertain prelude to the upheaval that lay ahead. Jack's fingers trembled as he read the subject line one more time. The weight of urgency pressed down on him, as if the very gravity of the situation was pulling him closer to a precipice. The meeting about the diner closure wasn't just another bureaucratic nightmare. It represented a much larger confrontation, one that transcended his identity as a businessman and navigated into the realm of his humanity. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs before expelling it slowly, calming the storm within. The tension thrummed coldly beneath his skin, a reminder that he couldn't turn back now. The image of Claire's hopeful expression flashed through his mind, juxtaposed against the sterile, unyielding expectations of the board. In that split second, Jack knew he was at a crossroads, presented with a labyrinth of choices, each with consequences he couldn't fully predict. Calculating the risks, he began to draft points for the meeting, his pen scratching against paper with fierce determination. Focus on sustainability, he scribbled. Engage with the community. The phrases took shape like bricks forming a path, but each word was laced with apprehensions. What would the board say? Would they embrace a vision that diverged from the bottom line? As he organized his thoughts, Jack remembered the faces of loyal patrons at the diner. Their laughter mingled with the comforting aroma of coffee and fried eggs, simple but profound connections threaded through these moments of shared humanity. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was a hub of stories, a tapestry woven from individual narratives brought together over every meal. The sound of clicking heels interrupted his reverie. Meredith peeked into his office, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "You all right, Jack?" Just thinking through some ideas, he replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask than an expression of truth. You've got that going to battle look, she teased, though her tone betrayed genuine concern. You can talk to me if you need to. He hesitated, grappling with the impulse to open up. But something held him back. Was he ready to reveal the depths of his turmoil? Thanks, Mir, but I have to sort this out myself. She nodded, her eyes scrutinizing him for a brief moment before she left. Alone again, he returned to his thoughts, ruminating over his personal conflict. If he didn't speak up, he would lose not only the diner but also the essence of the growth he had begun to embrace. Jack needed to identify a way to convince his peers of this radical vision. He considered the others on the board, seasoned executives with impressive resumes but antiquated perspectives. Would they understand the logic in outreach? Could he ignite a spark within them that mirrored the passion blooming inside of him? With each passing moment, urgency mounted. He envisioned the boardroom, the cold gray walls, the long table polished to near perfection, and the emptiness that often permeated meetings centered on profit, rather than purpose. This time, he wouldn't sit quietly among them. He would assert himself, not as a risk-averse CEO but as a spokesperson for ideals long left in the margins. As he fine-tuned his preparation, a deep realization settled in. His journey wouldn't be merely about saving the diner, it was an opportunity to transform how he approached his career, redefining success not by traditional profit margins but by the connections that fostered true community welfare. In that moment, he grasped the magnitude of the challenge ahead. The path was littered with obstacles, a cacophony of fear whispering that failure loomed. Yet there, nestled in stark opposition to that fear, was hope, a flicker fueled by profound purpose. Jack stood up abruptly, a resolute determination taking root. Today would not just be another presentation, it would mark the beginning of a pivotal transformation for himself and the diner alike. With another heavy breath, he dialed a number he had neglected in all the chaos. His heart raced as it rang. Claire would need to be part of this. The time had come not just to present ideas but to bring real stories to the forefront. As Claire answered, he felt the spark of collaboration ignite. We need to talk. I want you to help me save your diner. A rush of anticipation coursed through him. But amid the promise of potential change, a shadow crept in, one he hadn't anticipated. What would his peers say when he brought Claire's voice into the fold? And so, with the conversation unfolding, a new question took shape: how could he ensure the integrity of the vision he had crafted without losing everything he had built? Jack's heart thudded heavily in his chest as he hung up the phone. The conversation with Claire had ignited a flame within him, but the growing weight of doubt settled quickly in its wake. Inviting her into the fold felt like an act of rebellion, a departure from the sterile, calculated boardroom battles he was accustomed to. What if they dismissed her contributions outright? What if she simply didn't belong in their polished realm? He paced the small office, grappling with the implications of this choice. Should he even be concerned about their perceptions? He felt a conflict rising between the clarity of his vision and the rigidity of their entrenched views. The irony was not lost on him. He had long since criticized the board's focus on profit margins over people, yet here he was, teetering on the edge of a similar mindset. Taking a seat at his cluttered desk, he began to sort through his notes again, searching for the language that would resonate with his fellow board members. His own hesitations whispered to him, questioning whether Claire's emotional ties to the diner would reinforce or undermine his logical arguments. This was all uncharted territory for Jack, where numbers lost their significance against the backdrop of genuine stories that he could almost hear the board's voices echoing in his mind, critiquing the emotional appeal he was contemplating. Sentimental nonsense, they would scoff, dismissing the richness of human connection. Noticing a stray piece of paper fluttering to the floor, Jack picked it up. It was an advertisement for a local artist's exhibit. The piece showcased a photograph of a group of elderly patrons laughing at the diner, surrounded by vibrant colors and the warmth of camaraderie. A spark of inspiration shot through him. What if this was the story he shared? The diner was not merely a place to eat, it was where lives intermingled. How could he encapsulate that in a succinct yet powerful narrative? He grabbed a fresh notepad and began jotting down ideas, his pen flying across the page. "Remember the regulars," he wrote. "Each meal is a moment in time, a connection, a shared experience." With each phrase, Jack felt the anxiety dissipate. It was becoming clear, his journey was not to sell a business, but to champion a legacy, offering the board a chance to realize that integrating community narratives could elevate their brand beyond financial profits. Suddenly, a thought flared: if he brought Claire's perspective into the meeting, he could demonstrate the diner's impact authentically. They needed a face, a heartfelt story that illustrated everything Jack had been trying to communicate. But the question gnawed at him: how do you introduce an unassuming waitress into a corporate world that thrived on resume highlights and bullet points? Jack felt invigorated by the challenge. Perhaps this was an opportunity to confront the very norms he had spent years grappling with. He could orchestrate the meeting differently. Should I present a case study? Could Claire narrate her experiences? His mind raced forward, formulating a plan. Before he could second-guess himself, he picked up the phone. "Claire, I want you to share your story, your perspective. Together, we can reshape how they view the diner. Are you sure about this?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. "Absolutely," he replied, swallowing down his own misgivings. "We're in this together." There was a pause. "All right, I'll do it." As they hung up, Jack felt a rush of adrenaline. He was stepping into uncharted territory, ready to confront the bureaucratic giants with something they hadn't anticipated: human stories over cold hard facts. But as the evening wore on, dread crept in. What if they crushed Claire's spirit? What if their skepticism drowned out her voice? Jack understood that he was not only fighting for the diner's closure but also for his own desperate transformation as an empathetic leader willing to embrace vulnerability. Tomorrow's board meeting would unfold secrets he was yet to uncover about himself. The path ahead promised more than just a clash of ideals. It would reveal who Jack truly was beneath the polished veneer of corporate persona. As night descended, certainty mingled with doubt, illuminating the phrase that lingered in his mind: the time had come to face the giants. Armed with nothing but an everyday story, could it stand tall enough to withstand their scrutiny? The morning dawned hesitantly, as if mirroring Jack's own trepidation. He brewed himself a strong cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filling his cramped office with a sense of urgency. As he sipped, he could feel his fingers twitching on the desk, a nervous energy urging him to rewrite the narrative he was crafting. What had begun as a moral battle was transforming into a stage for profound personal evolution. That he reviewed his notes once more, the ink barely dry from the night before. But now, fragments of doubt wormed their way back in. Was it really wise to place Claire at the center of this confrontation? The vulnerability of introducing someone's heartfelt story against the cold backdrop of corporate expectations was dizzying. Yet, there was also an undeniable allure in the idea. If he could intertwine Claire's voice with his presentation, perhaps they could choke the board's cynicism with raw sincerity. Jack's phone buzzed on the desk, a message from Claire, affirming she would join him at the diner an hour before the meeting. The thought of seeing her, of witnessing her resolve firsthand, sent waves of determination coursing through him. They were stepping outside the worlds they knew, Jack from the calculated corridors of corporate power, and Claire from the comforting yet confining diner atmosphere. As he walked into the diner, he felt the familiar clatter and warmth wrap around him, a stark contrast to the anticipatory chill of the boardroom that awaited. The morning light spilled through the windows, casting a glow on the worn booths and erasing the doubts that clung to him. Claire was already there, pouring coffee and chatting with regulars, her laughter ringing like a bell. "Hey, Jack," she called, beaming as he approached. "Ready for this?" Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Jack found himself smiling, albeit nervously. "I am now, especially with you here." As they began to talk, Claire shared anecdotes about the diner's patrons, weaving stories that revealed the emotional fabric holding the place together. A son visiting his elderly father every Sunday. A couple celebrating their wedding anniversary with a slice of pie. Each tale painted a vivid picture of connection, of how food served as more than a meal, but as a bridge for human interactions. Jack listened intently, feeling as though he were peeling away layers not just from Claire's narrative, but from his own perceptions. She spoke with passion, illuminating aspects he had overlooked, and Jack began to realize that these stories could create an emotional backdrop for his presentation. It wasn't just Claire's voice he was integrating, he was unearthing his own latent ability to lead with empathy. What if we frame the diner as a community lifeline? Jack suggested, pacing slightly. We can position it not just as a business, but as a vital space where human relationships thrive. The transformation was palpable, Claire's eyes sparkled with excitement. Exactly. The diner isn't just a venue, it's a heart beating in this neighborhood. As they refined their approach, an idea crystallized in Jack's mind. They needed to demonstrate the diner's impact through tangible results, a way to juxtapose Claire's heartfelt insights with concrete data. He fell into a rhythm, imagining the presentation slides, a vibrant image of Claire with customers, juxtaposed against graphs reflecting customer satisfaction and growth. Their conversation flourished, and with it, Jack felt a burgeoning confidence. They were not merely crafting a pitch, they were constructing a narrative that intertwined personal stories with metrics. It was the bridge Jack had long sought, guiding him to become the leader who championed community over corporate coldness. However, as the meeting time drew closer, anxiety flared anew. Would the board embrace the human aspect? Or would they categorize it as irrelevant fluff? Jack wrestled with the prospect that the men and women he worked alongside might still see the diner through narrow lenses, unwilling to shift away from their profit-centric mindset, but Claire, with her unfaltering spirit, was offering him something different, an opportunity to dismantle the very barriers that had kept him chained to a singular viewpoint. As they shared a final moment before heading into the lion's den, Jack realized that this meeting was about more than just saving the diner. It was a pivotal moment for him, too, shaping him as a leader who dared to challenge the status quo. "Let us show them," he urged, his heart racing but filled with resolve. "Definitely," Claire replied, her eyes gleaming with the promise of something transformative. But as they walked towards the boardroom, Jack questioned whether his newfound conviction would withstand the scrutiny ahead. Would the giants truly perceive the strength and vulnerability, or would they cast aside Claire's story with the ease of a dismissive wave? Just before they entered, he whispered to himself, "This is it. Let us see if we can change minds and hearts." With that thought hanging in the air, they pushed open the door to the room, ready for whatever awaited them inside. Jack stepped into the boardroom, the air thick with tension. The polished table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark reminder of the sterile environment where corporate decisions often eclipsed personal stories. He felt the weight of judgment lurking in the eyes of his colleagues, their glances a silent challenge. As he settled into his chair, adrenaline coursed through him. He could feel Claire's presence at his side, a steadying force amidst the turbulence of his thoughts. Would they truly understand the heart of the diner, or would they dismiss it as yet another emotional plea? He took a deep breath, resolving to channel the stories he had heard into something powerful, something undeniable. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Today, we're not just discussing numbers or percentages, we're exploring how we could redefine our perception of success." He slid into the opening slide, revealing a vibrant image of Claire serving coffee to a smiling patron. A ripple of surprise spread across the room. Jack pressed on, describing the diner as a community lifeline, weaving the threads of human connection into the analytical fabric of his presentation. As he spoke, he could feel Claire's excitement spark behind him. Her enthusiasm was palpable, echoing through the boardroom. But the board members remained stoic, their expressions unreadable. Jack's heart thudded. Would this be enough to break through their indifference? He transitioned into Claire's stories about the patrons, allowing their voices to resonate within the sterile walls. "Consider the couple celebrating their anniversary," he said, recounting the tender moment Claire had shared. "How does that translate to our bottom line? It's simple, when people feel connected, they return. Their loyalty blossoms from a meaningful experience." Murmurs spread across the table, but they were cautious murmurs, calculating, skeptical. Jack sensed the shift but knew he had to push further. He presented data that displayed the diner's unique value proposition, the way it fostered relationships beyond mere transactions. Here are the customer satisfaction metrics, he asserted, flipping to the next slide, which displayed a chart. It shows an unprecedented rise in patron loyalty when the diner successfully engages with the community. He could see interest flicker in the eyes of some board members, but just as hope sparked, doubt crept in. Was it enough? We all want to see profits increase, Jack continued, addressing the remaining skeptics. But what if I told you that true profitability comes from building community ties? In a world driven by globalization, local connections are your most valuable asset. The room shifted, energy oscillating between uncertainty and intrigue. Yet, Jack noticed some faces wrinkle with concern, likely leery of this seemingly soft approach. Sensing he was losing the room, he decided to veer into uncharted waters. Let's talk about vulnerability, he proposed. It's not just a business strategy, it's a fundamental human truth. We have an opportunity to embrace the imperfect and the personal. In doing so, we don't just create loyal customers, we form a family. Silence fell like a heavy curtain, tension thickening the air. Jack quickly glanced at Claire, whose expression mirrored the blend of anticipation and anxiety he felt. Would those sitting across from him grasp the depth of his message, or would they revert to their familiar dismissiveness? As the meeting progressed, questions arose probing, analytical, but not dismissive. Jack's confidence began to swell as he ventured off script, sharing his own fears and motivations behind this initiative. He revealed how Claire's passion for the diner was igniting not just her own pursuits but also stirring something deeply personal within him, a challenge to shed the rigid expectations of his corporate persona. As feedback started to accumulate, Jack inhaled deeply, holding on to this moment of transition. His team members were shifting, they began to see the diner through a new lens, recognizing the inherent worth in connecting with people rather than just numbers. But then the meeting took a turn. A prominent board member, Arthur, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Jack, this all sounds well-intentioned, but what does vulnerability look like for our shareholders? An unsettling silence fell. Here was the moment, a direct challenge that put Jack's resolve to the test. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his response, the air thick with professional stakes. Jack's mind raced. Was he willing to risk it all for a shift in perception? Would he stand firm in the belief that cultivating humanity in business was worth the pushback? In that instant, everything coalesced within him, igniting a fierce determination he hadn't known existed. It means risking the status quo, he replied, his voice imbued with a newfound strength. It means showing our shareholders that profitability can come not just from numbers but from nurturing relationships built on authenticity. With that declaration, he felt a shift within himself, as if he had broken through a barrier that had long held him captive. Would they embrace this challenge, or would they resolutely resist? The meeting felt charged, and as he looked around the room, Jack could sense the walls beginning to crack. He wasn't just fighting for the diner, he was fighting for an evolution for himself, but just before they could discuss further, a phone buzzed, interrupting the tension. Jack's stomach folded in on itself as the sound ricocheted around the room, a reminder that time was short. Would Jack's conviction be enough to tip the balance, or would they retreat back into familiar patterns? As he caught Claire's eye, he knew this was just the beginning of a much deeper battle, one where his identity as a leader would be forged anew. Let's wait and see, he thought as the discussion resumed, uncertainty clinging to the air like smoke. What would unfold next depended not just on their engagement, but on his unwavering commitment to a path he was still discovering. In the days that followed the board meeting, Jack found himself entrenched in a new rhythm, one that involved constant reassessment of his approach and the underlying motivations of his colleagues. He began his mornings by arriving earlier than usual at the diner, absorbing the warmth of the sunlight filtering through the windows and the familiar sounds of early patrons engaging in their morning rituals. It provided him not only with clarity but also a growing sense of purpose that he spent more time observing Claire as she moved seamlessly through her routines, each genuine interaction showcasing a side of business Jack had previously overlooked. When she laughed with a regular or shared a comforting word, he saw customer loyalty blossom into something far deeper. These small moments began to weave themselves into Jack's mindset, prompting him to analyze how such connections could reshape corporate culture. On a particularly busy Thursday, Jack caught sight of a young woman seated alone, her laptop open but her expression distant. He watched as Claire approached, casually engaging her with a question about what she was working on. To Jack's surprise, the woman's face brightened instantaneously, her barriers crumbling in the face of Claire's genuine interest. For the first time, Jack realized that vulnerability wasn't just necessary in corporate boardrooms, it was equally vital in everyday interactions. Inspired, Jack decided to implement a new strategy. He called a team meeting at the diner, a departure from past practices. He wanted to capture the diner's essence within their corporate environment. "We need to focus on building authentic connections," he explained, addressing his colleagues, who were gathered curiously around the same table where he had confronted Arthur. "Let us create a culture where employees feel motivated to engage, and where our clients feel valued." Uneasiness seeped into the room as heads began to nod, but uncertainty lingered. A colleague, Jenna, raised her eyebrows, clearly skeptical. "What if our clients don't respond positively? What if we don't see the return on our investment?" Jack felt that familiar flutter of doubt, but he pushed through it. "We have to take that risk. Vulnerability and authenticity can be a competitive advantage. Our customers are looking for real interactions, for someone who cares, and we need to be that someone." The enthusiasm in his voice seemed contagious, slowly igniting a spark in the room. It was a turning point. He was no longer just promoting Claire's stories but embodying the values they represented, a commitment to personal and professional growth rooted in empathy. Over the weeks, Jack worked diligently to infuse the diner ethos into corporate policies. He started organizing weekly open mic sessions, where staff shared personal experiences tied to their roles. Slowly but surely, the culture shifted from a sterile, profit-driven model to one characterized by collaboration and engagement. Jack would sit, absorbing the candid testimonials from his team, both in awe and reflection, yet, along with the initiative came trepidations, particularly from Arthur. Unbeknownst to Jack, Arthur had been compiling a report on declining profits, just waiting for the right moment to stage an intervention. The tension escalated when Jack received an invitation for a follow-up meeting with the board, where Arthur would lay bare his findings. In preparation, Jack revisited his earlier strategies, recalling what had shifted during the diner presentation. He needed to find a balance, how to honor his vantage point while addressing concerns about corporate efficiency. He sought counsel from Claire, whose perspective grounded him. "This is your moment," she encouraged one evening, her voice steady and reassuring. "You've worked hard to shift the narrative, but remember, it's okay to show both confidence and uncertainty. Engage them, share the stories that mattered to you." Jack nodded, taking in her words. The reservoir of self-doubt started to drain away, leaving space for a deeper understanding of his own growth and how imperative it was to present this evolution authentically in the next meeting. As Jack sat in front of the board, poised to unveil the combined efforts of his initiatives, the air crackled with expectation. Arthur's report lingered ominously in the background, the moment of confrontation felt inevitable. Jack inhaled deeply, steeling himself for the challenge ahead, ready to address both the numbers and the humanity behind them. Would his transformation stand firm against the statistical realities of the business? The answer loomed heavy, and as he prepared to speak, he could feel the weight of the past and the potential of the future colliding. What would Arthur reveal, and could Jack navigate this pivotal crossroads to secure not just the diner's future but his own leadership identity? The boardroom was stifling, and Jack's heart raced. As he settled into his seat, familiar faces blended into a sea of scrutinizing eyes. The tension was palpable. Arthur sat across the long table, a self-satisfied smirk dancing on his lips as he shuffled through his papers, the damning report on declining profits glimmering like a lead weight in the midst of hopeful change. Jack's mind flashed back to the diner, to Claire's smile, to the warmth of shared stories transforming strangers into a family. He had to channel that energy now, to help the board see beyond the numbers that Arthur brandished like a weapon. He cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the silence. Before we dive into the numbers, I want to share where we've been and where we're going, Jack began, his voice firmer than he felt. He could see some skepticism, the faces he had encountered when proposing vulnerability as a business strategy. But today, he would speak to their hearts as much as their minds. He told them about the open mic sessions, recounting a poignant story shared by Maria from sales about her struggle to balance work and family care. What Maria showed us is that our employees are not just cogs in a machine, they have dreams, struggles, and triumphs, Jack emphasized, hoping his enthusiasm would reverberate through the stale air. When they feel valued and heard, our business thrives. He could see a shift in the room as a few heads nodded in reluctant agreement. Even Arthur's brow furrowed, doubt flickering momentarily across his face. Jack pressed on, juxtaposing Maria's story against the stark reports Arthur had prepared. We have to ask ourselves, Jack continued, what kind of company do we want to be? Purely profit-driven, or do we want to foster a culture of connection and authenticity? As he spoke, Jack's conviction grew. He felt power radiating from his core, emboldening him to tackle the very fears that had haunted him. Would this shift be labeled naive by some? Yes, but he sensed the hunger for connection in the boardroom. They didn't want lifeless statistics, they wanted a vision. At last, he turned to Arthur. I acknowledge there are significant concerns about our financials, but I truly believe that the investments we make in our people will yield returns that far exceed what we can measure on paper. Arthur leaned forward, his demeanor still skeptical but twinged with a hint of curiosity. Let us explore that, Jack, he said, his tone challenging. How exactly do you propose this culture change will address the numbers? Jack felt a rush of adrenaline and inspiration collide. By embracing our shared humanity, we give ourselves the opportunity to build loyalty, he asserted. Loyal clients. Loyal employees. It's not just about the immediate outcome, but rather nurturing relationships that will weather the storms of our financial challenges. The board murmured, some exchanging glances. Jack's heart quickened at their shifting responses. Do you remember the story of Claire? He pressed on, shifting gears to a relatable narrative. How she transformed a simple interaction into a meaningful connection. That is what we need. It's time we embed this philosophy into our operations. It's not necessarily about cutting costs only, it's about fostering a nurturing environment that leads to sustainable growth. As he laid out his vision, a swell of hope coursed through him. Jack was not just justifying his initiatives, he was advocating for fundamental change, a call for a new identity rooted in connection. He had never felt more alive, more like a leader he respected, but just as he began to feel triumphant, the room settled into a heavy silence. Arthur cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. You say all this, but can we afford to gamble on your ideas without solid evidence? What if we continue seeing declines? The question was daggers, Jack's breath caught momentarily. Doubt slinked back into his mind, raising its ugly head. He could smell the fear creeping back, the possibility of failure. As uncertainty loomed over him, Jack realized he had to confront it head-on, to articulate a path forward that combined his compelling narrative with concrete strategies. The risk now felt more substantial than ever. It was not just a gamble on his ideas, but a challenge of his leadership itself. He inhaled deeply, centering himself. This was his moment. I understand the concern, Arthur. But don't we owe it to ourselves and to our employees to at least try? The board's response hung in the air, thick with tension, as he prepared for the next confrontation. What revelations would Arthur reveal about the profits that could either unravel or reaffirm Jack's mission? The pivotal nature of the impending decision weighed heavily, testing Jack's newly forged identity as a leader. Jack's words hung in the air, a fragile lifeline tethered to a boardroom drowning in skepticism. As Arthur's gaze bore down on him, Jack felt the weight of expectation sharpen into a blade, threatening to cut through his resolve. The question lingered, could he truly navigate this precarious moment and emerge unscathed? Silence reigned for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Jack's heart raced, the rhythmic thump echoing in his ears, drowning out the murmurs of discontent that skimmed the edges of the room. What if this was his breaking point? He had invested every ounce of his energy into defining a vision, yet now, in the crucible of critique, doubt clawed at him, whispering insidious fears that threatened to unravel the fabric of his conviction. "Jack, I'm asking you how you plan to implement this," Arthur pronounced, his tone devoid of warmth. "Vulnerable connections 1T solve the tangible problems staring us in the face." Jack clenched his fists beneath the table, grounding himself. His mind surged with the stories he had gathered, the hidden strength unveiled through shared experiences. "It's about engagement, real engagement," he countered, his voice steadier. "When our employees feel empowered, they take ownership. That spark fosters innovation, which can directly translate into productivity." The board shifted restlessly under the strain of his appeal. Jack could almost hear their inner dialogues clashing against his aspirations. Would they concede to the nuances of human connection? Or were they simply counting numbers, trapped in the cycle of quarterly reports? "I understand the skepticism, but look at companies forging ahead through crises," he pressed. "They're not just surviving on profits, they're investing in cultures that nurture talent. Take Zoom, for example. Its rise wasn't solely due to its technology. It thrived because it made connection paramount, which made us rely on it, especially in times of isolation. We need to cultivate that level of commitment and loyalty here." Intrigued glances flitted across the table. Jack noted how Arthur's facade faltered, revealing a glimmer of curiosity beneath his entrenched skepticism. "Fine, let us say we pursue your route," Arthur replied, crossing his arms as he leaned back. "What resources do you have in mind?" Jack hesitated, knowing he had momentum, but needing a roadmap to back his vision. "I propose a pilot program." His heart raced at the audacity of the idea. "We initiate employee-led innovation teams representing various sectors. They collaborate on ongoing issues, fostering enlightened solutions. Stories from sessions like open mics can create a direct line of empathy while generating business strategies." The proposal had escaped his lips before he could fully process its implications. There was a palpable shift in the room, a shift he couldn't ignore. Hope unfurled within him, accompanied by a flicker of that familiar confidence he felt earlier. Yet still, Arthur was unyielding. "Courageous, but this involves time and money. What guarantee do we have that this will effectively turn the tide on profitability?" Jack's chest tightened. Arthur's words cut deeper than before. This was the moment that could define his legacy for better or worse. It was clear that he needed a way to answer that question without losing the faith he had ignited. "Profit doesn't solely come from bottom-line calculations," Jack replied, the fervor in his voice rising. "It emerges from a culture where people feel they are part of a solution and that their contributions matter. From that culture will stem loyalty beyond mere transactions, driving repeat business." He dared to glance around the table again, reading the mixed reactions. Was it possible they could come to see the vision? Or would they, like Arthur, remain firmly locked in a fear-based paradigm? Jack took note of Margaret, the HR head, who leaned forward, intrigued by the potential employee-led initiative. Perhaps he had found an ally, albeit a cautious one. But before he could seize the moment, Arthur nodded slowly, almost condescendingly, "You're idealistic, Jack. But push comes to shove, we can't afford to be reckless. You need to draft a detailed plan. And if you fail to deliver? What if?" Jack interjected, suddenly aware of the path he would have to tread. "What if the risks of doing nothing bear greater consequences? Are we willing to let fear dictate our future?" The air thickened with tension. He realized this was not just a clinical business discussion, this was about values, identity, and the kind of company they were willing to become. Jack could almost see the gears turning within the board members' minds, weighing his challenge. Yet, would it lead to acceptance or rejection of his vision? He felt it brewing beneath the surface, an inevitable collision between old paradigms and burgeoning hope. What would he reveal about his own depth of conviction in the face of potential upheaval? And would Arthur's resolution hold strong, or could Jack's passion stir something deeper among his peers? The next moment would determine how far he could stretch his newfound leadership. Jack emerged from the boardroom, breathless yet invigorated, his pulse quickening with a mix of elation and uncertainty. Against all odds, he had made his case for the diner, for its sustenance in both the community and, paradoxically, within the corporate framework. During the uncomfortable moments when tension threatened to consume him, he'd felt his conviction harden, standing firm against the fear that clung to the atmosphere like fog. The unanswered questions still obscured his vision, though. Could the board truly pivot their legacy and embrace a more humane approach to business? Days passed, and an unmistakable transformation fluttered within him. Jack made it a point to pull ideas from the diner into his own daily practices, integrating small moments of human connection with employees in the corporate office. He began to arrive early, just as he had at the diner, fostering an informal atmosphere in which dialogue flourished. Employees began to share not just job-related insights but personal anecdotes as well. The sterile aura of the board began to shift, reflecting the warmth that once thrived at Claire's diner. Then came a breakthrough. Arthur, still skeptical yet intrigued, extended an olive branch. "Let us pilot Jack's program," he conceded, breaking the tension that had built up like a coiled spring. "But I want metrics, actual data to assess its performance." Exhilaration flush against disappointment, Jack accepted the challenge, viewing it as an affirmation of progress rather than a submission to the old ways. "We'll collect feedback from both staff and clients to gauge the emotional impact of our changes. Engagement, satisfaction, repeat visits will quantify this," he assured, his voice resolute. As the weeks unfurled into months, statistics began to speak volumes. The diner became a prototype for their initiatives, its charm radiated throughout other outlets, helping reshape interactions. Jack could see numbers climb slowly but steadily. Employee satisfaction scores surged. Turnover plummeted. Customers often returned with friends, drawn not just by food but by a sense of belonging, tangible proof that authentic connections could indeed drive profitability. On an afternoon overlooking the lake, Jack sat with Claire, relishing a simple meal made of leftover bread. The metaphor wasn't lost on him, they had salvaged something precious together. He took her hand, feeling firm and warm, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had once paralyzed him. "I can't thank you enough for this. It feels monumental," he admitted, the honesty resonating in the air. Their discussions would weave through plans, aspirations, and stories, piercing through layers of conformity Jack had long embraced. Claire's humble yet profound recognition of the beauty in the simple was a steady reminder of why they had embarked on this journey, the aspiration to impact lives. Months later, in a renewed board meeting, Jack stood before the members again, but this time, something monumental had shifted. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation rather than skepticism. Jack opened with a poignant story from Claire, one that encapsulated their journey. "It isn't just about profits, it's about the legacy we create for future generations." He could sense engagement, eyes sparkled with understanding. As he shared remarkable statistics alongside heartfelt narratives, the pivot was palpable. Board members began to embrace this new vision with genuine enthusiasm, advocating for further initiatives that reflected the humane business practices they had embraced. One by one, their doubts morphed into advocacy. As the meeting concluded, Jack felt the warm glow of recognition and accomplishment that transcended mere professional metrics. He had reshaped his career, not only safeguarding the diner but also breathing life into a fiscal structure rooted in empathy, community, and sustainability. Standing on the precipice of an authentic transformation, he understood that true success had nothing to do with the accolades displayed on his office wall. It was about the lives touched, about becoming a leader who embodied vulnerability and humanity in the rigid construct of corporate expectations. Jack stepped away from the table, solid confidence thrumming through him, knowing he had proven that one person's determination could initiate a ripple effect of change. Be part of this journey now. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel for more exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to show your support and boost our reach. Don't just reflect on this, comment your thoughts and theories about Jack's journey. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely must witness this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second, take action today.